Have you ever felt the world pause, not because of war, not because of disaster, but because a voice went silent? Not a political leader, not a headline, but someone who, for decades, defined the way we feel. On September 16, 2025, that voice, calm, resolute, endlessly human, fell silent forever. Robert Redford has died, and with his passing, it's not just a man who has left us. It's an era, a movement, a conscience. It's the final chapter of a life that shaped generations. But behind the golden smile and effortless cool was a man marked by tragedy, exile, relentless self-doubt, and the brutal burden of fame. This isn't just the story of a celebrity. This is the human story of Robert Redford, and why, even in death, he remains one of the most enduring forces in cinematic history. September 16, 2025. The morning began like any other in Sundance, Utah. The sky pale and wide, the air brittle with desert chill. There was no warning, no foreshadowing, just stillness. The kind of stillness that arrives before something irreversible. Inside a modest, earth-toned home nestled beneath the Wasatch Mountains, Robert Redford exhaled for the last time. No press conference, no hospital vigil, just nature, silence, and the woman he loved, Sybil, by his side. Word didn't break with flashing banners or news alerts. It leaked like a hush through the walls of Hollywood, through tight circles of family, friends, filmmakers. At first, people didn't believe it. Couldn't. How could someone so present, so essential, be gone? And yet, he was. Within hours, headlines began to flood. Hollywood mourns the death of Robert Redford. A cinematic era ends. The last breath of a giant. But these words felt too small, too procedural. Because what had truly been lost wasn't just a man. It was a witness to 6 decades of American transformation. A living conscience. A soul who never stopped asking, what matters? And that was the real shock. Not just that he had died, but that a world where Robert Redford was no longer alive felt suddenly less honest, less grounded. A world slightly more hollow. For his family, the grief was personal. His children and grandchildren didn't just lose a patriarch. They lost the steady hand that had held them through so many storms. They lost the one person whose quiet presence could still a room without ever needing to speak. For the film world, the loss was existential. This wasn't just the death of an actor. It was the dimming of one of the last guiding lights of cinema's golden conscience. There will be others. Always. New voices, new stars, but there will never be another Robert Redford. Because what he represented can't be recast. It was earned, forged, scarred, and lived. And now, it's gone. Long before the world would come to know him as the Sundance Kid, Robert Redford was just a small boy from Van Nuys, California, fighting battles no one could see. Born on August 18, 1936, into the unassuming home of Charles and Martha Redford, his earliest years were shaped not by cameras or applause, but by uncertainty, illness, and an aching fragility that quietly defined the man he would become. His family wasn't poor, but they lived simply. His father worked as a milkman before eventually settling into an accounting job at Standard Oil. His mother, kind, gentle, and fiercely protective, was the heart of the household, and it was her strength that would become his first true inheritance. At just 10 years old, Redford was diagnosed with polio, a diagnosis that, in the 1940s, still carried the weight of paralysis, even death. He was confined to bed for weeks, his body weak, limbs stiff, each day haunted by the possibility that he might never walk again. And yet, even in that shadow, there was light, his mother's hands. She would sit beside him each night, massaging his unresponsive legs, whispering words of hope into muscles that had forgotten how to move. She never showed fear, never wavered. To her son, she became a quiet force of nature, teaching him, without ever intending to, that resilience isn't declared. It is practiced, it is repeated, and it is often invisible to the outside world. The sickness eventually passed, but the lesson remained. What few saw was the boy who emerged from that bedroom was no longer ordinary. He had learned how quickly the body could betray you, how suddenly the world could shrink to 4 walls and a ceiling, and how, sometimes, survival doesn't roar, it whispers. Outside that house, childhood resumed. He played ball, rode his bike, but something had shifted. He was watchful now, cautious, not out of fear but out of understanding, because Robert Redford had met suffering early. And it had not destroyed him, it had forged him. At 18, Just as he was stepping into manhood, Redford suffered a loss so profound it would haunt him for decades. His mother, his healer, his protector, went into surgery. She never came out. A simple operation, a sudden infection. And just like that, the woman who had saved his legs was gone. Redford would say that was the year the ground gave way. His father never remarried. Their home became a silent museum of grief, two men unable to speak through their sorrow. It would shape every role, every silence, every shadow he'd carry on screen and off. Angry, adrift, and numb from loss, Redford spiraled. He lost a sports scholarship due to drinking. He left school, and then he left America. He wandered through Europe, sketching and painting, living in hostels, catching trains to nowhere. It wasn't glamorous, it was exile. But in that self-imposed wandering, something stirred. He discovered that expression, real, raw creation, could be survival. By the time he returned to the US, he wasn't healed. But he was ready to begin. New York. Late 1950s. Robert enrolled at Pratt Institute to study painting. Then cautiously, he stepped into acting, enrolling at the American Academy of Dramatic Arts. His first jobs were forgettable TV roles, Perry Mason, Maverick, The Twilight Zone. But they paid the rent, barely. And then came the insult that would burn inside him for years. He was too handsome to be taken seriously. A gift and a curse. He once said, "They only saw the surface, but I had so much more to say." In 1963, he got his chance. On Broadway, in Barefoot in the Park, Redford showed the world the storm behind the smile. It was a revelation. And Hollywood finally paid attention. The late 60s and 70s didn't just make Redford a star. They made him a symbol. Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid. The Sting, The Way We Were. All the President's Men. He wasn't just in the conversation, he was the conversation. And yet, the doubts never faded. Casting directors had once dismissed him, now audiences adored him. But the contradiction remained. Was he loved for who he was, or for what he looked like? This wasn't vanity, it was a quiet identity crisis. The pressure to be perfect, to never fail. And when The Great Gatsby underperformed, it wasn't just a disappointment, it was a wound. But Redford didn't retreat. Instead, he took control. In 1980, he directed his first film, Ordinary People, the story of a family drowning in grief. It was intimate, quiet, devastating, and it won the Academy Award for Best Director. Hollywood was stunned. But for Redford, the Oscar was not a prize, it was vindication, proof that beneath the face was a filmmaker, a truth-teller. In 1981, he changed film history. He founded the Sundance Institute, a place where young, unpolished, unheard filmmakers could find space. Critics laughed, studios ignored it. But Redford kept going. He used his own money, fought against commercial pressure, protected the soul of the movement. Today, Sundance is a global institution. The birthplace of voices that would have never been heard. That was Redford's magic. He didn't just take the spotlight, he shared it. But while his legacy was rising, his personal world was unraveling. Redford and Lola Van Wagenen had 4 children, but fate was cruel. Their first son, Scott, died of sudden infant death syndrome. Their second, Jamie, battled chronic illness for most of his life. In 2020, after decades of surgeries and struggle, Jamie passed away at 58. Redford once whispered, "You never heal. You just learn to live around the wound." Even as he appeared untouchable on screen, he was twice shattered as a father. And in 1985, after 27 years, his marriage ended. He carried it all with quiet dignity, but the pain never left. Natalie Wood, Paul Newman, 2 friends who helped shape him, both gone before him. Their losses left silences in his soul no audience could see. And yet, he remained open. In the 1990s, he met Sybil Sagers, a painter. Their love wasn't fiery, it was steady, quiet, healing. They married in 2009. With her, Redford built something new, not a legacy, but a life. They worked on climate art projects like The Way of the Rain. For the first time, he found peace. In his final years, Redford moved slower, spoke softer, but he never stopped creating. He still painted, still mentored, still believed in story. Until the morning of September 16, 2025, when the man who once carried the soul of American cinema into a new era quietly left this world. No final film, no camera on him, just the sound of the wind outside his home in Utah. Sybil held his hand, his children surrounded him, and then, silence. He left behind an estate worth nearly $200 million. But that's not what he'll be remembered for. He gave us more than movies. He gave us Sundance. He gave us truth. He gave us himself. A man who transformed tragedy into purpose, who never stopped fighting for the stories that mattered, who walked through darkness but kept lighting candles for others. He is gone, but Robert Redford's legacy is not buried. It is living inside the very spirit of cinema itself. If his story moved you, honor him now. Like this video, subscribe for more stories like this, and in the comments, tell us what Robert Redford meant to you. Because legends don't die in silence, they echo forever.